Goodness, goodness, goodness. This meeting is being live streamed. Okay. Everyone. We got just a couple more people that are joining. And while they are coming on, welcome everyone. And thank you all for joining us for today's A Month of Service presentation of taxpayer rights and income tax preparation. My name is Nia Murray and with Neighborhood Recovery, and we are one of the partners in the A Month of Service collaboration. Also included is the City of Houston's Department of Neighborhoods. And we have joining us today, Ms. Myra Hippolyte. Also, our presenting partner, representing the Houston Volunteer Lawyers, we have Ms. Courtney Johnson, who will be presenting our information for today. But also included in the partnership, we have Lone Star Legal Aid, the Earl Carl Institute, Houston Bar Association, Harris Central Appraisal District, and Harris County Tax Assessor Collector's Office. And together, we make up A Month of Service. And I want to welcome you all back. Happy New Year to everyone. I hope everyone had a safe and happy holiday season and New Year. And we're going to get right back into our wonderful presentations that we have for the community. A Month of Service decided to come together several years ago in a collective effort to reach more community members to get information out relative to asset building, asset protection, maintaining of generational wealth, and community empowerment. We do know that there are a lot of underserved communities that are out there that do not have access to a lot of information and resources, which is why we come together to provide this information, such as taxpayer rights, to the community. There are a variety of different workshops that A Month of Service offers on a monthly basis. If there are any presentations that we do not currently offer that you guys may be interested in, throughout the year, we do encourage you to reach out to us and kind of give us your feedback and your opinions of different types of workshops or information that you would like to see presented to the community. So please feel free to reach out to Myra or to myself with that information. With that being said, again, we want to welcome you all for coming and for joining us today. We want to thank you all for your continued participation and support of this A Month of Service collaboration. Without the participation of all of our volunteers, of our partners, and the community residents such as yourself, we would not be able to present and provide this information to the community. One thing that we do ask is that you share the information with as many people as you possibly can, so that we can ensure that we can try to reach as many people as we possibly can that don't have access to this information, that don't may not have the technical capability to join us on Zoom. But you do have the opportunity to also watch a recording of this session, as this session is being recorded, and will be sent out to all of the participants that have registered for today. We are also broadcasting live on our social media platform at Amos Houston TX on Facebook. So you have community members have the opportunity to tune in there as well. Also, do keep in mind that we are broadcasting live, so we ask that you we encourage everyone to ask whatever questions that they have of the presenters, but keep in mind that we are recording and broadcasting live, so we try to protect your privacy as much as we possibly can. So we ask that your questions to be general in nature, and if you find yourselves in need of any civil legal assistance, we do encourage you to reach out to our legal service partners like Houston Volunteer Lawyers for more one-on-one personal detailed questions or assistance that they may be able to help you with. So do please keep that in mind. Also, information that is presented on all of our legal presentations is considered to be educational purposes only. It is not legal advice. Again, however, we do encourage you to reach out to our legal service partners if you find yourselves in need of any civil legal assistance. So with that being said, there will be a lot of information that's going to be covered here today. Again, we encourage you to ask questions. Um, Please feel free to type your questions into the chat, and we will be going over the questions at the end of the presentation aloud, as well as if you are joining us on Facebook, we ask that you put your questions into the comments section, and we'll make sure that your question is answered at the end of the presentation again as well there. So with that being said, we're going to move on into our introductions, and we will get right on into our presentation. So Myra, would you like to go ahead?
Good afternoon, everyone, and Happy New Year's. It's 2024, and we are back at it again. The Month of Service Partnership, as you all know, are here for each one of you on behalf of our new mayor, Mayor John Whitmire, and our director, Takasha Francis. We want to welcome you to the Month of Service Partnership. The partnership is all about giving back free information to all the Houston community. Guys, don't forget that this is all for informational purposes only and not legal advice. I'd love to say, and Nia and I are attorneys, and that we know all, even though we think we do, right, Miss Nia? But we don't. So just remember, this is just for informational purposes and not legal advice. And know that when you're going through a stressor in your life, know that this team is here to help you through whatever struggles you're going through, at least with information. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day, and Happy New Year's, everyone.
Okay. Ms. Courtney, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself and move right on into your presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
You there?
Yes, hold on just a second.
Okay.
I love technology and hate it all at the same time.
It happens to the best of us. Uh-oh, I think we lost her. Yeah, I think we lost her. Hopefully we can get her log right back on again.
You know, it's a new year, and we're all trying to get the hang of it. It's been a while, maybe about a month or so.
A little over a month, yeah.
And we're all excited about the new tax rules, new processes. I know they were telling us to wait. If you are looking for your child credit, do not be the first one to file, or you should take your time because there might be some changes coming in. So probably what you need to do is slow down, breathe, and let the experts tell us what we need to do. I know I used to be the first one to turn in my tax return as soon as possible. But now I've learned just to breathe, make sure I've got all the information I need. And, you know, there's always new changes. And that's one of the big reasons why a lot of our communities have to wait for their tax return, because there's changes continuously going on. So when you just take your time and watch what changes are coming through, you know, let's breathe and get this process going. You know, we have been going through quite a bit of changes ourselves. One of the new process with the city of Houston, we have a new mayor, and we always want to welcome Mayor John Whitmire. And I keep saying because I'm trying to think of what to say, so please forgive me. But we'd like to welcome our new mayor, John Whitmire, to this wonderful city and county and state of Texas. Mayor Whitmire has been with the state for over, 22, 30, 40, 50 years. So we are very grateful that we have an expert that's going to lead and guide the city to the next era. So welcome, Mayor Whitmire. And this is the partners of the Month of Service Partnership. And as soon as Miss Courtney gets back on, we'll get it started. Has Miss Courtney,
Yeah, she's on. She's getting it in there now. We see your screen, Courtney, so you're good to go on our end.
fantastic.
Hi,
Miss
everybody.
Courtney, welcome and thank you.
I'm sorry about that. Like I said, technology, it's a blessing and a curse all at once. So today we're going to talk a little bit about everybody's rights as a taxpayer, and then a little bit about the processes and procedures that you're going to look at when you're dealing with the IRS once you start getting notices and you're getting audited and so on and so forth. So the Taxpayer Bill of Rights basically has 10 rights that every taxpayer has. The first is the right to be informed. So all taxpayers have the right to know what is required by them in order to essentially be in compliance with tax laws. They're entitled to clear explanations and IRS procedures for any and everything that the IRS gives them, from forms to notices, any kind of correspondence. And they have the right to remain informed about any IRS decisions about their particular tax accounts. And then they also have a right to quality service when dealing with the IRS. So essentially, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights states that taxpayers should receive prompt, courteous, and professional assistance in their dealings with the IRS. But they also should be spoken to in a way that is easy to understand. They should understand what they're communicating with the IRS about, what's expected of them, and what the outcome of any situation should be. And all of that should be communicated to them clearly. This one is obviously very important to pretty much everybody. Taxpayers have the right to pay no more than the correct amount of tax. So any taxpayer is only obligated to pay the amount that is actually legally due. Now, this does include interest and penalties. Those are amounts that would be legally due if you owe them. And then the IRS is also required to apply any payments towards a taxpayer's debt properly. Generally speaking, they apply any payments to the oldest debt first, and we'll get into why that is in a little bit. So every taxpayer also has the right to challenge the IRS's position and be heard. This means that they can raise objections to any amount that the IRS says that they owe. They are also entitled to provide any documentation to support their position. And the IRS is responsible for actually considering any documentations that submitted, considering any objections that are timely made, and giving a taxpayer a response if they do not agree. Taxpayers then have the right to appeal any IRS decision in an independent forum. This would be through the IRS's Office of Appeals. This is, like it states, an independent forum. It's a fair and impartial administrative appeal. You can appeal most IRS decisions. And once that's been done, the IRS does have a responsibility to submit a response to you in writing regarding their decision. And if you still disagree, you generally would have the right to take your case to court after the appeals process is complete. Taxpayers also then have the right to finality when it comes to their tax cases. Taxpayers want to know and also have the right to know the maximum amount of time they have to challenge any IRS position, as well as the maximum amount of time that the IRS has to audit a return or collect any debt. So generally, when it comes to timing, any notice that a taxpayer receives will specifically state the time frame in which they have to respond in order for whatever objection they have to be considered timely. As far as the IRS's part of the timeline, they have 3 years to audit a tax return from the date it's filed, and 10 years to collect a tax debt. And there are certain rules and exceptions that apply that will suspend that 10-year period, but generally speaking, they have 10 years to collect a tax debt once it's been finalized. And then taxpayers also have the right to know when the IRS has finished an audit, when the appeals process is complete, when a tax court case has been finalized, so on and so forth, so that they can know what they owe and know where they stand. The next right the a taxpayer has is the right to privacy. Taxpayers have and should have the right to expect that any dealings they have with the IRS will, one, comply with the law, and two, be no more intrusive than absolutely necessary. They also have the right to expect that the IRS will respect any of their due process rights. This includes any search and seizure protections, and also that they will provide a collection due process hearing if necessary. Taxpayers then have the right to confidentiality. They have the right to expect that any information that they give to the IRS will not be disclosed unless it's been authorized. They also have the right to expect that appropriate action will be taken, and employees, tax return preparers, and anyone who wrongfully uses their information will have to suffer the consequences of such use. Taxpayers also have the right to retain representation. They have the right to seek counsel from an attorney, or in some cases, a CPA or someone authorized to interact with the IRS or appear in the tax court to represent them and help them through any dealings that they have with the IRS. And at Houston Volunteer Lawyers and other places around Houston, I know Lone Star Legal Aid, South Texas College of Law, there are low-income taxpayer clinics that can provide such assistance for taxpayers who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford representation. And lastly, taxpayers have the right to a fair and just tax system. Taxpayers have the right to expect that all of the facts and circumstances of their particular situation, anything that might affect their liabilities, their ability to pay, or their ability to provide the information that the IRS is asking for, will be taken into consideration. They also have the right to seek help from the Taxpayer Advocate Service. The Taxpayer Advocate Service is an independent function of the IRS. They operate independently of the IRS, and they're essentially there to help ensure that all taxpayers' rights are being met. So if there's a situation where you're not getting timely responses from the IRS about your case and things aren't getting resolved because of that, that's something that a taxpayer advocate would be able to help you with. Okay, so that essentially covers the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. Anyone who's ever received any kind of audit notice or a notice of deficiency or anything like that in the mail has probably gotten the Taxpayer Bill of Rights pamphlet. So a little bit about the process of what you would look at, what a taxpayer would be, I guess, looking forward to if they were to be audited. So an audit generally starts in one of two ways. So the IRS has a computer program that essentially will identify returns that have incorrect information. For instance, wage and income amounts that don't match what's submitted on a 1099 or a W-2, things like that. The other way an audit can start would be information that the IRS receives from outside sources that would indicate problems with the return. That can be newspapers, public records, individuals. That information, though, has to be accurate and reliable. So if the IRS determines that the information is that, then they can select a return for examination from there. Once a return is selected for audit or examination, generally that can be done one of two ways. It can be handled through the mail, or it can be handled with an in-person interview. Oftentimes the IRS will send you a notice saying that your return has been selected for audit or examination, and they will request very specific documentation regarding aspects of your return, and they will want you to send that information to them in the mail. Or they will want you to sit down with an examiner in person, and y'all can walk through whatever documentation the taxpayer has and whatever's written on the return from sitting across the table from each other. So once the exam function is complete, if a taxpayer doesn't agree with the proposed changes that an examiner makes to their return, those changes can be appealed through the IRS's Office of Appeals. Most tax issues are settled in the appeals office, so that they don't have to go through the tax court process and waste time and money dealing with all of that. Essentially, what would happen is you would be put in contact with an appeals officer. Once your audit has been finalized, you would receive a notice saying these are what the changes are going to be, and they'll give you a time frame for which you have to contact the appeals office if you want to appeal those changes. Generally, it's 30 days. You have 30 days to appeal. And if you submit your case to the appeals office, then you'll work with an appeals officer, and they'll try to resolve your liability as best they can in their office. If that still doesn't work, or if you missed the deadline to file for an appeal because you only have 30 days, you can also use the tax court as an option. So, like I said, if you miss the deadline, if you choose not to go the appeals route, if you go the appeals route and you don't agree with the appeals officer's findings, then you have the option to take your case to court. It can go to the U.S. Tax Court, a Court of Federal Claims, or U.S. District Court in your area. If you decide to do that, then the IRS is going to have the burden of proof. Given that you kept adequate records, you cooperated with the IRS during the audit and appeals process if applicable, and you meet certain other conditions. Generally, if you're going to take your case to tax court, you have 90 days to file within the tax court, file your petition in order for it to be considered timely. Otherwise, it can be dismissed for lack of jurisdiction. So timelines are very important with the IRS, at least on the taxpayers side of things. So if the court winds up agreeing with you, then obviously your liability would go away, your debt would go away. Generally, that would include penalties and interest. And you could also potentially recover any administrative and litigation costs that you incurred when you took your case to court. But that's generally only if you followed through with the entire process. So audit, then you went through appeals, and then you went through the tax court. Now, one thing that a lot of people don't know is that if you miss the deadline for appeals, or you skip over the appeals process and want to go straight to the tax court, when your case gets to tax court, if they see that you never went through the appeals process, you will get shuffled back down to the appeals office, and they will try to resolve your issue there. So one way or another, if you're going through appeals, then if you do wind up in the tax court, most cases are still solved or resolved outside of a courtroom. Generally, you or your representative will work directly with an attorney from the IRS Office of Chief Counsel, and you will try to resolve and settle your case before it actually goes to court. So if that's the case, you have an audit, you have a case that needs to go through appeals or the tax court. Like I said earlier, Houston Volunteer Lawyers does have a low-income taxpayer clinic, and we are available to help. My name's Courtney Johnson, and I've included my email here. We also have a main phone number and an intake line that you can call, or you can go to our website, makejusticehappen.org. And that's it for me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I think it's time for questions. Are there any questions in our chat?
Yes, there was one here that went a lot faster than what I was prepared for. I was trying to download questions from the internet to see if there were any that were asked in advance. It says, how are taxes determined for persons working and also receiving Social Security payments? Courtney.
Oh, sorry. So, I mean, I guess, what do you mean by that? Like, how are, I mean, because a tax bracket is going to be a tax bracket, wherever your
Right.
income is going to be whatever your income is. And so if you're still working while you're collecting Social Security, that's fine. You are going to have to include all those amounts in your income. So if you're getting Social Security on top of what your income has been for the past few years, then it could potentially push you into a higher tax bracket, which would increase your tax liability. As far as your regular income, you'll have, money withheld from every paycheck that will hopefully pay off any liability that you would have at the end of the tax year.
Right.
And I mean, Social Security is not really my area, but I do believe there is an option to do the same thing with Social Security check.
It is. You can take your, do the same thing just like you do a regular W-2 form with Social Security. Some people opt not to, and some people opt to, and that's a decision that each person will have to make personally. But you still have to pay your taxes for your
Right.
Social Security.
Absolutely.
What's the next question, Nia?
Go back here. Try to scroll back up. It says Social Security payments only began after age 70.
Wow.
Is there a cutoff time? Isn't there supposed to be, or I've heard people say that that after a certain age, you're not required to file an income tax return? Like if you're collecting Social Security after a retirement age or something like that, you don't have to file income tax?
No, I actually don't. I mean, I can't say for sure. Tax preparation is not really my area. I'm more on the once you get in trouble side. That's where I am. But I don't believe that that's the case. I think that the only reason you would be able to not file a return would be if you didn't have enough income. Like there's an income threshold, and if your yearly income is below a certain amount, then you're not required to file.
Okay.
But I don't believe that there's an age cutoff for tax returns.
Yeah, I think there's not, because my mom, yeah, I don't think there's an age either.
I mean, my grandmother's in her 80s and she still files a tax return every year.
Yeah, and there is a specific, if you don't earn enough, they'll let you know that you don't earn enough.
Right.
But when you file, but yeah, I don't think there's an age, but I could also be wrong. But for that's a great question, Nia, and let's get the right information for that person. So what we'll do is we'll take your email and we'll send you the correct information for your question, just to make sure we got the right information for you.
I have a more of I have another kind of question. I have a friend of mine that waits to file tax returns because they know that they're going to get a larger refund back. So it's basically almost like a little savings account for them. So they wait a few years, they file all the tax returns at the same time so that they can get a bigger refund back. They were told by the IRS that you only have a certain amount of time to actually file your tax return and to get the money, get the refund back that you were actually entitled to. Otherwise, you lose it. Is that correct?
That is correct. The time frame is 3 years from the date it was due, including extensions. So it's usually due on the 15th of April, minus a holiday or whatever. But you can extend to October. So 3 years from October 15th, the due date with an extension of that return is the time frame you have to file. Otherwise, you're not entitled to your refund anymore.
But the IRS can go back and wait 10 years before they can try to collect taxes from you that you owe.
They only have 3 years to audit. So say hypothetically someone files their 2023 tax return on April 15th of 2024. The IRS has until April 15th of 2027 to audit that return. And if they don't audit that return in that time frame, then they can't do anything. They can't come and collect. They can't do anything. If they audit in that time frame and you go through the whole audit exam, appeals, tax court, all that, and they still determine that you owe money, when that final amount is determined, they have 10 years to collect it.
That's what it is. We thought wrong, Nia, because I always thought you had 7 to 10 years for them to come and audit. So it's actually how many years again, just to confirm?
3 years to audit.
3 years to
3
audit.
years from the date you filed, though. So if you file timely, then 3 years from April 15th or October 5th, whatever the date is that you filed. If you file late, say you want to be, one of those people that saves up your money and has your little savings account, so you don't file your 2023 return until 2025. Well, they have 3 years from the date you file in 2025.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that's something new, which is really exciting because I have been, even though I hired someone, I always make sure I've got my receipts. It's still stressful. I always thought it was 7 to 10 years for them to audit, but it's 3. Fantastic.
Yeah, I was working with a client last year, and they had been audited for 2018, 2019, and 2020. And they were bringing in all this paperwork, and they had folders for tax returns from like 2003. And I was like, yeah, you can burn that, shred it. I mean, obviously it's personal information, so you don't want to just throw it away. I was like, but you can get rid of all that. 3 years. That's how long they have from the date you file.
Okay, everyone, remember that now. The IRS has 3 years from the date you filed to audit you. So, which is something new. And a lot of us thought it was 7 to 10 years. Let me ask you something. If you filed an extension, then it would be 3 years from the date that you filed that extension, correct?
It's 3 years from the date you file your return.
Okay.
So if you file an extension and then you don't file your return until October, they have 3 years from whatever day in October that you filed.
Oh my gosh, Courtney, you're off.
But 10 years to collect.
10 years to collect if they determine that you actually owe. So if they audit you and you go through the whole process and they decide, oh, well, or y'all settle or whatever the case may be, then they don't have anything to collect. So there's nothing there. But if they determine that you actually owe an amount, they have 10 years to collect it. Now, once you get into the collections process, and I didn't put anything in the presentation about this, maybe I should have. It's just, it can be a little complicated and convoluted. You do have options once you get there, especially for our low income taxpayers. But I've seen all kinds of people do this, from all different tax brackets or whatever income ranges or whatever you want to call it. So you can set up an installment agreement, which is essentially you're just setting up a payment plan with the IRS. Now there are stipulations that have to be met. You can't miss payments. You have to file your tax returns every year, things like that. Any violation of their rules, and this is all listed in the paperwork. And this is something that any low-income taxpayer clinic can help you do if needed. But then they'll essentially void your installment agreement and you would have to start over. And then there's also an offer and compromise where you essentially submit financial information, and you're basically telling the IRS, I know that you say I owe this much, but I can't afford to pay it. So then they evaluate your financial information, and when you submit your paperwork, you're saying, okay, I can't afford to pay X amount, but what I can afford to pay is Y. They look at your financial information and they'll either approve or deny it. If they approve it, then you only owe Y. Does that make sense? So you owe $10,000, but you can't pay $10,000. So you submit an offer and say, I can pay $2,000. And if they accept that, well, then your liability is $2,000, not 10.
And they can come back and ask for the other $8,000 later.
Again, there are requirements that have to be met for that offer. And it's a lot of the same stuff. You have to make sure that you're still filing tax returns every year. If you set up an installment agreement for that offer, you can't miss payments and things like that. But no, if you're meeting all of the requirements that you're supposed to meet, they can't go back and say, oh, well, your income situation has changed. So
Yeah.
now we're going to make you pay $10,000.
So
Okay,
once
that's what I
they
was getting.
agree and for that agreement with you, then it's done. They can't
Yes,
come back
essentially
and
they're entering into a contract with you.
right. Fantastic.
Okay.
And then there's also it's called currently not collectible status. If your financial situation is at the point where you cannot afford to pay anything, you can apply for currently not collectible status, which will essentially put a freeze on your tax account for now. Now, the IRS in that situation can come back and reevaluate your finances kind of sporadically or periodically to see if your situation has changed and now you can afford to make payments. But while you're in currently not collectible status, they can't put liens or levies on you. They can't come after your wages. They can't do anything to you during that period to come after
Courtney,
their money.
let me ask you something, which I'm love what you're just saying, and it just got me thinking. So if you've been audited and you know, oh my God, I don't have the money to pay them. I don't understand. I have all my receipts. You should try to find an attorney like Houston Volunteer Lawyers. If financially you're not able to pay or negotiate or discuss the situation with the IRS, you should have an attorney assist you through that process. And we have legal partners that can assist you with concerns like that, like Houston Volunteer Lawyers, Lone Star Legal Aid. Of course, they're income qualifying, but we also have the Houston Bar Association. That's one of our partners that have the Houston Lawyers Association, Houston Lawyer Referral Service, that they vet different attorneys and they can refer you to the right attorney that best fits your needs. So
Oh,
thank
absolutely.
you, Courtney. That's great information. This kind of puts everything together. That's why we created this partnership, because there's different situations. Just like right now, you may get audited by the IRS. Well, you still need to find an attorney. It's not just for estate planning. It's not just for civil service. Oh, it is civil service, just like this. But it's also when you're in a situation with the IRS, have someone lead and guide you through the process. Don't go at it by yourself.
Oh, absolutely. I would recommend to anybody and everybody that gets audited or is dealing with a tax issue and having to deal with the IRS that they refer to an attorney, to a tax attorney, sometimes even a CPA. I prefer a tax attorney just because tax attorneys, there are a lot of tax attorneys that specifically deal in nothing but what they call tax controversy, which is dealing with this process, audits, appeals, and tax court and collections. That's all they do. The other side of tax attorneys is business or tax planning, but there are attorneys that deal in nothing but tax controversy. And this is what they do. And tax laws and dealing with the IRS, it can all get very complicated and convoluted. And that's frustrating. It's very frustrating. And that's one thing that any client that I deal with that's one of the very first things that I try to do is explain to them that I understand that this process is extremely frustrating. Nobody likes dealing with it. Everybody dreads getting anything in the mail with the IRS on it because it's just a lot. And it's just not something it's not an area that a lot of people are very familiar with. But this is what tax attorneys do. And if you have access to someone, whether it's a low-income taxpayer clinic or whatever, that's my recommendation every single time.
And you know what, Courtney, everyone, when you get that letter, take a step, take a deep breath, and contact either the Houston Volunteer Lawyers, Houston Lone Star Legal Aid, TSU Earl Carl Institute. Now, there are income qualifying purposes, requirements. But if you know, well, no, I would not qualify for the income qualifying, I would call the Houston Lawyer Referral. If you're in Houston, Texas, and each city and each county has their own, because they vet it. Don't go and talk to the IRS by yourself. A lot of us get terrified and just do the completely incorrect thing to do. So first thing, take a breath, slow down and contact one of our legal partners, as well as either the Houston Bar Association, Houston Lawyer Referral Service, which they have vetted attorneys already. And when you're going through a stressor, it's much easier if you go through one of these processes and then don't talk to the IRS or any organization like that by yourself. Now, remember, this is just for informational purposes and not legal advice. So don't say Myra told me or Nia told me. No, we didn't. We're just giving you advice and suggestions. That's it.
Let me ask. I have a couple of questions, but first I want to ask you to give information about the low income taxpayer clinics. What are they, and then how do they work, and then how do people participate?
So I've been practicing. Oh God, I've been a licensed attorney now for going on 6 years, and I've worked with 2 different low-income taxpayer clinics. One was with South Texas College of Law, where I did my JD work, and I was a student attorney in their clinic. And then now I'm also obviously working with Houston Volunteer Lawyers in their low-income taxpayer clinic. As far as a lot of the, I guess, income requirements and those kinds of things, that's not my, like, I don't filter that, if that makes sense. I don't.
Right.
Once a client gets scheduled for a consultation with me, they already meet those requirements. So I don't really deal with that. I know that there is obviously an income threshold you have to make below a certain amount, and there's an amount in controversy threshold. We can't take cases where you owe, the IRS says you owe, I think it's more than $50,000. Working with the clinics, I've never even seen that. So I just feel like that would be highly unlikely in a situation for somebody who would be coming to the clinic. But so with us, the way, and I've only been with Houston Volunteer Lawyers for a few months now, so the processes are still a little new to me, but the way I've understood it to work is you can go online to the website that we have, Make Justice Happen, I think .org. I think that was what it was. That's so sad. And
that's okay. We can help you with that.
You can fill out an online application or intake form. We also, like, I had our intake phone number on there, so you can call in and do an intake, I guess, kind of interview with one of our staff members, and they'll be the ones, I guess, that ask all the income questions and things like that to make sure that you qualify. Once that's done, they don't really get into the tax aspects of what's going on. They make sure you meet the requirements, and then they'll schedule you for a consult with a staff attorney, which right now is me. And on that day, on that scheduled day at that time, I'll give you a call. We'll talk through what's going on. And if it's something that needs extended representation, then what we do is connect clients with pro bono attorneys. So if we take on a case and it needs extended representation, we put it on essentially our wait list, and we have pro bono attorneys that come in quite frequently and pick up these cases, and then they take over from there. I serve as a mentor to them because a lot of these attorneys that we have doing pro bono work aren't tax attorneys. So they don't really understand the processes very well. So they'll consult with me. Clients still have access to me if they need me for anything. And that's kind of where we go from there. If on the consult call, it turns out that you really don't need extended representation, you just need a little advice in the moment, then I give it to you right then and there. And then it's kind of an open and shut thing.
And one of the things that we also do with the Month of Service Partnership, I am sharing the link that everyone can go to. We will pre-assess you. We have 4 different legal partners that we will refer you if you're going through any civil type of legal issue. And so we do the pre-assessment, and then we'll refer you to the correct legal entity that might be able to assist you. We do have the income qualifiers also. And if you're above or below a threshold, we will refer you to the best legal partner that can assist you. This is the Month of Service pre-assessment process. So instead of you going to each different legal partner and going through intake with each one of them, you just do one single pre-assessment, and we will refer you to the best, one of our best legal partners that is a partner with the month of service.
And I'm gonna kind of, I guess, plug HVL here for a minute. We do have more than just the low income taxpayer clinic. They have a lot of different services that they offer. I know they have a vet clinic where they work with veterans and dealing with the VA. I believe I know they have a family law practice there, and immigration law, I think, and a couple of other different things that I know that they do. So they're very well-rounded. The staff attorneys are brilliant. Our staff is amazing. So I'm just gonna, like I said, toot HVL's horn a little bit. And Nia, I think you said you had some more questions.
Yeah, I did. Now, I know that there are a lot of I know in particular, Baker Ripley has an income, a taxpayer assistance center. There's the VITA sites that they have, which is the volunteer income tax assistance, and that's just to assist low income folks with the tax preparation.
Yes.
When you go to these different organizations or to different people to help with filing your tax returns, what are the protections, or what protections are in place for those folks that have these different people that are filling out their tax returns? They don't know what exactly or what the ins and outs are about tax returns, and who's doing what or whatever the preparation details, what deductions are being claimed and whatever. They just know that somebody's filling out their tax returns or filling out their income tax form for free or at a low cost, and they're just getting them filed. What protections are in place for them if something ends up being fraudulent or something ends up being incorrect, or what does a taxpayer do in that regards?
So it's interesting that you brought this up because I actually just dealt with this a few months ago. So if a mistake is made on your return, whether you make it or a tax preparer makes it, if the IRS comes back and says that you have a liability and they're right, you owe that money. And there's nothing that you can do to protect yourself there because you owed the money then, just like you owe it now. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's not like you're not really out anything because you owed the money to begin with. But there are protections when you go to one of these VITA places or have anybody prepare your return, because if you have incorrect information on your tax return, you are subject to penalties, accuracy related penalties. If a tax professional files your return, then you can file a penalty abatement and have those penalties removed because you relied on a tax expert essentially, and they were the ones that made the mistake. So that's where the protection comes in. If you file your own return and make those mistakes, then you have to pay the penalties as well. But if a tax professional files and makes the mistake, then you can get out of the penalties with a penalty abatement.
And you yourself would have to do that, or does that have to be done with an attorney as well to file a penalty abatement?
There are forms that a taxpayer can fill out on their own for a penalty abatement. Again, I always recommend using an attorney just because they know the language, they know the statutes, they know the ins and outs of dealing with the process. But like I said, the IRS does have forms, and I do have to give them credit when it comes to their forms. For the most part, their forms are pretty straightforward. So if it comes to the point where you don't qualify for a clinic or you can't afford to hire representation to help you with things like that, they generally have forms for just about anything that you would need.
Now, Courtney, on something like that, if your tax preparer did something incorrect and you end up owing, you still have to pay. The only difference is you would have to not pay
the penalty.
The penalty.
Okay. Yeah. And a lot of times you can get, well, the penalty 99% of the time will be dismissed because it's written in the code. If you rely on the expertise of a tax preparer or a tax expert, then you're not liable for accuracy related penalties because you did what you were supposed to do as a taxpayer.
Right. Yeah.
You knew that you didn't know what you were doing, so you went to somebody that claimed that they did.
Exactly.
And
that's
also,
that's exactly what I was getting at.
Yeah, and it'll also relieve you from some interest. So if there's a accuracy problem with your return and they determine that you owe money, or that you owed money when you filed, oftentimes they'll say, okay, well, you owed this money back then, so we're going to charge you interest on it. But again, you relied on a tax preparer, you relied on an expert. If they're going to relieve you of the penalties, oftentimes they'll relieve you of that interest too, because it again was not your fault. You did what you were supposed to do. You went to somebody and had them file your return. Had they done it correctly, you wouldn't owe the interest because you would have paid it out right then.
And again, if there's an error or something like that, the IRS still only has 3 years from the time. They can't go back 5 years from now. It's like, oh yeah, there was an error on this return that we just caught or just saw or whatever, then it's too late at that point, right?
It is too late.
All right. Because you
Okay.
know what, I always have heard that if they're auditing you, they can audit you for 7 years, past. But is that different than them looking back at your records, or is it the same 3 years?
It's 3 years. To my knowledge, it is 3 years, period. Now that they have 3 years to initiate the audit, it doesn't have to be complete in 3 years. So April 15th of 2023 or 2024 to April 15th of 2027, if they initiate the audit on April 14th, then they're still in their time frame.
Okay.
They just have to initiate it.
So why is it said that you're supposed to keep your tax returns on file for at least 7 years then?
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, with the client that I was talking about earlier, and they were bringing in records from 2003, I recommended for them, I think 5 years. Okay. But I mean, generally, I tell people 3 years. They have 3 years to audit you. So once that 3 year deadline is up, then you're good to go. If you want to be a little bit more on the safe side, then I would do 5 years, but I don't think you need to be keeping records for 7 years.
Okay.
That's great.
There's another question here in the chat. Is there a default percentage amount automatically applied to volunteer federal income tax withheld on Social Security income if a specific amount is not requested?
I honestly do not have an answer to that question.
We'll get an answer.
Yes, that's a tax preparer's question.
Oh, and you were talking earlier about the Vita clinics, like with Baker Ripley and some of the other places. So those places are great. The Vita clinics, they're all over Houston. And we've actually recently worked out with, specifically with Baker Ripley. We're going to be at those clinics, I think once a month. I myself will be there just in case people do come in. Obviously, they're there to have their tax returns prepared. But if they're having issues with past tax returns, then I'll be there to consult, or if we want to do full-blown intake, we can do that. And I think we're going to try and set that up with a couple of other Vita clinics around the city. I think our goal is to be in a different Vita clinic once a month.
That's awesome. Fantastic.
So we'll be directly once a month, and then we're going to try and set it up to where we're at, I guess, 4 different places each month, one each week.
They used to send out a flyer that has like a list of like all the different Vita sites or like where they're doing their clinics and things. Do you guys have access to that, Courtney, that you can send to me that I could share to the participants?
I do not. I'm fairly certain that HVL has one. I just do not know exactly where to find it.
Or a list of the locations where you will be when someone has questions or whatever, so that they'll know where HVL will be at those sites on those days.
We are still trying to set that up. I know this coming Friday, I will be at Baker Ripley. Which one is it?
Thanks, Jamalix.
Okay, Yamalek said she will send it.
To ask. Yeah.
Okay, she's got it. All right, so I will definitely send that out to everyone.
And also, Nia, we will get with Baker Ripley to get the dates and places also. And we're having another virtual workshop on February 27th. Can we have someone with a tax preparer process also as a speaker?
We could try to find our
questions.
We can have our guy that we had before from Baker Ripley. I think we'll see if he'll be able to join us then.
That would be great. So then we can have both tax preparation questions answered as well as afterwards in case you get audited.
Okay. All right. Good deal. Yes, that will be great. All right, Ms. Thomas, we'll do our best. We're going to make sure that we get them here. Again, that it will be February the 27th. It's the last
Right.
Tuesday in February.
From 1 to 3.
I'm just going back to make sure that I've gotten all the questions that were in the chat. And let me check Facebook just to be on the safe side.
And also take your time before filing. Make sure you have all your documents in hand. Make sure any new changes in the law have already been answered and updated. Because you know what? IRS will not send you a payment or a check until all the laws and everything have been completed by our Congress. So a lot of times, you say, well, okay, I sent, my return, 21 days ago, and I still haven't heard something. 9 times out of 10 is because they're still waiting for updated laws that are coming in. So just take your time, breathe, get all your information, and then, and get assistance in filing. A lot of us would love to file on our own, but I love what she just said. If you hire someone to do it, then a lot of the stressors will be removed in case there's any problems.
And
Absolutely.
I don't know if this is a tax preparer question or one for legal rights. When it comes to those programs, especially those like during COVID, those financial assistance that government assistance, that was distributed, and like student loan forgiveness, like when people have gotten their student loans forgiven, are they required to, like, is that considered like income or like gifts? Because you know how when you get a lot of things dismissed or creditors dispose of certain things or whatever, then you have to file that on your tax return. Are they required to file that forgiveness? Oh, it's in the chat. As part of like is it considered income? And I don't know if I'm asking the question correctly because I'm
No, I
kind of
know
thinking
what
of it
you're
as
saying, like with the stimulus payments, right?
Right.
Where they're
Yeah.
required to
Yeah.
include that. I think that it's kind of based on the situation. Like for everything, it's different. I want to say with the stimulus payments, you did not, because people were able to file a credit on their tax returns if they didn't receive the stimulus check, and they should have, which essentially lowered their income, lower their taxable income on that year's tax return. So like, I think for those particular payments, that was not required, but I know for others it is. And then there was the whole mess with people withdrawing amounts from their 401s or their IRAs, things from their retirement accounts during the COVID time period. And there were very specific rules about you could withdraw up to $100,000 tax, well, not tax-free. They still taxed the money as income, but you weren't subject to the additional 10% penalty for an early withdrawal. And then they also gave you the option, instead of including the entire amount that you withdrew in whatever year it was, 2020, you could spread that out in equal chunks over 3 years. So if you withdrew $90,000 out of a retirement account, the money was still taxable. You didn't have to pay the extra 10% or 20%. Anyway, you didn't have to pay the extra 10 or the extra 20%, and you could split that $90,000 up into $30,000 chunks over the next 3 years of returns. So it didn't up your income by 90 grand in one tax year. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So there's always different rules. Generally though, professional tax preparers, tax attorneys, things like that, we do our best for the most part to stay up to date with those. Tax preparers for sure. I did some work with the Vita Clinic while I was still in law school, and the binder that they gave me of information for how to prepare those returns was ridiculous. It was like a 2-inch thick binder. It was ridiculously thorough. It had all of the new updates for that tax year. And Vita also, I don't know if a lot of people know this, people who haven't filed tax returns or who need to file back tax returns, a lot of Vita clinics will help you file those as well.
Fantastic.
Are those income specific or income uh qualifying kind of clinics?
I don't know.
I think they
I'm
are.
actually not sure if the Vita clinics have an income requirement.
We'll find out.
Okay. I wanted to share this too, even though I will be sending out this flyer. This is your taxpayer advocacy service, and there is a QR code that's got information on it. So if anybody wants to scan the QR code really quickly for more information, then please feel free to do that. But I will also include the this flyer with the email that I sent out of the link of this recording if anyone's interested in that. So, all right.
Hey, sorry, Yami, do we have a flyer or something that lists the Vita clinics around Austin?
Not yet, but
Okay.
once we do, I'll send them over to Myra and Nia.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
Another question here. I heard somewhere that if you have more than one retirement income, that taxes can be taken out of only one of them for both. How accurate is that? Is that an income tax preparer question too?
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure I understand the question.
If you have two different incomes, if you don't want taxes taken out of one at all, and you have extra taxes or double the taxes or whatever taken out of one income payment versus the other.
I mean, that is likely a tax preparer question, but to my knowledge,
I'm sorry. It was me. I was wondering, like, if you have, hey, ladies, by the way.
Hey, Miss Thomas.
Maria, I miss you guys. And
We hug you, sending hugs.
topic, yeah. But if you have more than one income coming in and it's time to prepare your taxes, rather than have taxes withdrawn from like both of them or three of them, however many you have, is it possible to just have whichever is the highest and just have and say, let that be the income that my taxes come out of?
so I mean, if you're talking about the withholding portion of it, the part
Yes.
that's throughout the year,
Yes.
again, don't quote me on this, but I don't think that that would be a problem because at the end of the day, the IRS doesn't really care where it comes from. They just
want to
know
get paid.
this is the money that you made during the tax year from however many different sources, and based on that amount that you made, this is what you owe. You can take it out of option A, you can take it out of option C, you can take it out of equally out of all 3 or 5 or whatever, but this is what you owe us.
Okay.
So I wouldn't see a problem in that. Again, don't quote me on it, and hopefully we can get a tax preparer at the next one and they can, either confirm or deny what I just said was correct.
Yeah.
But like I said, I mean, generally speaking, the IRS says, this is what you owe. I don't care where it comes from, but we want our money.
Okay.
Thanks, Miss Thomas.
You're welcome. So bottom line, pay the people.
Yeah.
Give them their money.
Yeah.
That's it. One way or another.
All
And
right.
another tip, I guess, for anybody who is self-employed or whatever, paying quarterly tax payments is probably the smartest thing that you can do. Because people who are self-employed, that they're not having that money withdrawn out of their paychecks or whatever, because they're self-employed or they're contract workers or whatever the case may be. And if you make quarterly tax payments throughout the year, it's essentially like the same thing as having money withheld from your paycheck. If you're making those quarterly tax payments, the IRS is keeping track of what you're paying every quarter. And then if you file your tax return and it turns out you paid in too much with those payments, they'll give you a refund of what you overpaid.
Let me ask this question. As far as if someone doesn't file a tax return and they actually owe, so of course they're going to get a penalty. Are all the penalties and interest that are incurred based on the amount of whatever is owed, or is there like a flat penalty amount?
Well, the penalties that I've seen the most, which are going to be your essentially timeliness penalties than your accuracy related penalties. It's the penalty is a flat fee. Like the penalty is X $1,000. Again, for the two that I see all the time. Other penalties I can't really speak on just because I don't have the same kind of experience. But if you do not timely file, whether it's you don't file an extension on time or you don't file your return on time, or if, like I said, they come back and they say, oh, well, there's something wrong with your return, and now you have an accuracy related penalty, it's a flat amount.
How many different penalties are there?
Quite a few, if I'm remembering correctly. But again, those two are the most common. Those are the two that probably 90% of people see.
Oh, wow. That makes you wonder what else can you actually get penalized for then? If there's multiple, other than a timely and accuracy penalty, there's other penalties that are out there that people could potentially get hit with and don't
There's
even know
also
it.
failure to pay.
And failure to pay penalty. So how is that different from a timely penalty? Because if you didn't file it in time.
So if you file on time, so say you go through whatever and you file your return, and based on your return that you file, it says you owe $1,000.
Oh, okay,
Oh,
gotcha.
you timely filed, but if you don't send them a check for $1,000, you didn't timely pay.
Got on top of interest.
Yeah.
Is there a maximum of how long interest and penalties can accrue?
Oh.
Or is it just until it's paid?
Until it's paid or until the 10-year collection runs out.
Okay.
And interest with the IRS compounds daily.
Oh.
Yeah.
But you can only have 3 years to get your money back from them that you overpaid.
That's okay. I don't want them auditing me after that. Now we're good.
And are you entitled to interest if you chose not to file a tax return for 2 years because you know you're going to get a refund? Are you entitled to interest that you didn't?
No.
That you didn't?
Mm-mm.
Oh.
No,
You
it
chose
doesn't
not
work
to
the other way
file.
around. And I would assume their justification is, well, if you had filed your return on time, we wouldn't have owed the interest.
Right.
Because otherwise, anybody that knew they had a return coming or a refund coming, and they just, didn't necessarily need the refund, they'd be like, oh, I'll just hold on to it for a couple of years and accrue some interest while I wait.
That's right.
Oh boy.
Courtney, I have a question about something kind of came up too regarding the way you receive payments or through what means, such as cash apps and these types of things, and them being over a certain amount of money and having to acknowledge that on your returns and all of that. I don't know if what the IRS kind of has to do with that, but I've been kind of hearing a little bit of something about it. Is there a, what am I asking? I just wanted to know how cash application, money transfers and things of that nature impact
Your tax return?
in general.
I remember Luz Martinez last year at the last one saying that they were trying to pass a bill or trying to get something going where I do know like the cash apps or whatever, they're sending you a statement. They're sending statements like every month now that or you could see how much money that you've collected, and over a certain dollar amount, they are supposed to be now required, from my understanding, to send you like a 1099 that shows that you've collected this income. Wow. Regardless of what it is. To what extent or whatever, I don't know. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know the amount thresholds and things like that, but I do know that that's becoming more of a thing. And I think a lot of it is like a lot of people that are contractors or people that maybe get paid under the table for babysitting or house cleaning or whatever. If all of their money is coming through one of those apps, whether it's Cash App or PayPal or Venmo or whatever, they need to have a record of it. One, the taxpayer needs to have a record of it, because if you do get audited, you need a paper trail saying, well, the IRS says I made X amount of money, but I didn't make that much money. I only made X amount of money. Well, you have a paper trail now that
Yeah.
said, this is what I made. And then, I mean, it also serves as a paper trail for the IRS. Essentially, like no different than a 1099 or a W-2 would.
Well,
To justify.
How is it determined to be
income.
That's good question, because I'm thinking, let's say you have horses or something, and you're like, okay, I'll just buy your feed for you, and you just give me the money back. You know, it could be something totally not related to income.
Because I know I loaned my daughter money before, and she's paid me back in that. So now if the money that I lent is now going to be taxable income for me,
Right.
I got a problem with that.
In a situation like that, if you were to get audited in a situation like that, which I would find highly unlikely, my guess would be that they're going to be auditing people who are receiving regular payments through the apps.
Okay.
But if for some reason, say it was a large amount of money, because you know anything over $10,000 automatically gets reported to the IRS. So if it was a large amount of money, so say in your instance, you loaned your daughter $10,000.
Oh, I ain't
right? But you see what I'm saying? You loaned your daughter $10,000, but she paid you back the $10,000.
Not happening here.
Okay.
Well, that's not income.
That's
right. It's just not, because it was your money to begin with. She's just giving you back the money you gave her. And that's something that you would be able to document. Like if they were to audit you and say, well, this shows that you had $10,000, you received this payment of $10,000 from so-and-so. Well, then you would go back and say, I received that $10,000, but I paid that $10,000 6 months before. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for instances like that, when you lending somebody money, is it better to actually also document, like in the notes, that if I send Myra $500, I'm notating Myra sent, this is a $500 loan. So then when Myra pays me back through that same transaction or through that same means, should she say repayment of loan or something, almost like a check registry? I don't know, nobody does a check registry anymore. Actually,
hey, Margarita does.
But
so my mother. Okay.
Is it better to do it through that same payment method to protect yourself, so it doesn't look like I gave her cash, but she's sending me the money back in Cash App?
We're friends. It's not a loan, Mia.
Well, I know.
I mean, if you're using the same medium, it's going to make it easier. So like if you loan her money in Cash App and she gives it back to you in Cash App, it's just going to make it easier because it's going to show up in the same statement.
Okay.
But either way, you're going to be able to document. Even if you go to the bank and pull out cash, it's going to be on your bank statement that you withdrew X amount of money. And as long as that X amount of money equals the money that you received back, then you have the justification for it.
So cover your butt, in other words.
But I do recommend, like, because I do this now. Anytime that you're sending money or receiving money, whether it's via Zelle through your bank account or Cash App or PayPal or Venmo or whatever the case may be, I always recommend putting that note in there for documentation purposes, but also for you, because if they audit you in 3 years, if there's no note there, you may not remember what that money was for.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what, we were doing that because we have rental property, and so if we're sending money, we put for whatever specifically rental property is going for. So yeah, that's awesome. Okay, great. Courtney, you're doing such a great job. Thank you so much.
All right. I think those are questions. I don't see anything else here on Facebook. Yeah, there were no questions on Facebook and no other questions in the chat. So I do believe that is it.
Thank you so much. And Nia, don't forget, this is all for informational purposes only and not legal advice, because you know what, Nia and I and Miss Courtney, we love to say this and this and that. And
well,
this
Courtney is.
Well,
Courtney is.
But it's still for informational. She's not hired by anyone, so it's still for informational purposes and not legal advice.
Well, I can't really be deemed to give legal advice without any kind of specific factual information for a case. This is very general, just information.
Education.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Thank you, Ms. Courtney, for correcting me.
For those folks that are joining us, we will be back on February the 27th. And hopefully I can get the tax preparer from Baker Ripley to join us to be able to answer those those specific tax preparation questions that a lot of you actually had, so that we can get a little bit more specific. I will also look for the schedule of the different VITA sites or VITA locations to include, and along with the email from of the recording, as well as the list of was it January the 26th
Yes, it's
clinic
gonna
that,
be this week Friday,
Right.
oh,
but
that is this week
yes,
already.
this week Friday.
Oh wow, okay. I'm like, wait a minute, 26th in this week. It's not that early already, is it? Like, so we're almost at February already.
Yes.
My gosh. Okay. All right. With that being said, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Miss Courtney. Thank you, Yami, for you guys providing this information for the participants here today. We really appreciate you guys taking the time out. Thank you all for the partnership and for the support of the month of service. Again, if there are any, and I will also include the February calendar so that you could see the other upcoming workshops that we've got scheduled for this month or for next month as well, that's coming your way. So if you have any questions about a month of service, please feel free to reach out to myself or to Myra. If there are any particular questions that you may have thought of that you don't want to come back and ask later on, please feel free to email us and we'll get them over to Courtney. If you are interested in any civil legal assistance, I will include the resource or the pre-assessment link for you all to send out as well. You email notes or flyers to us. Yes, ma'am. I will
Yes,
email
you
the
will.
flyers that we just referred to, as well as the contact information. Everything that we just talked about, where we said that there were notes, we're gonna send them to you. So don't
Yeah.
worry.
We're
And in
also still continuing to have, we're still continuing to notarize transfer on death deeds the
Mhm.
third Monday of each month.
Mhm.
So make sure you get pre-assessed. Now, remember, we're not attorneys. We're not going to give you legal advice. You should have your form filled out. And if you do have questions, we'll be able to assist you with information for informational purposes only, but not legal advice. We are notarizing transfer on death deeds for free on the third Monday of each month, but you'll have to be pre-assessed first. This is a month of service partnership program, and but there is no income qualifying for a transfer on death deed notarizing. So there's two different things. When you're doing your will and estate plan, you're pre-assessing for free legal assistance. You have to income qualify. And if you don't income qualify, we will refer you to the Houston Lawyer Referral Service. But for a transfer on death deed to get it notarized, we're not income qualifying. So please make sure. We don't care if you make $1 million or you make $2. We don't care. We will assist anyone that lives in the city of Houston. And so we'll notarize all transfer on death deeds for free. Now it's up to you to make sure you file it at whatever county clerk that property is in. They usually charge $40, $50 to file it. So make sure that you take the time out and file it correctly. Don't put it in a drawer or your safe deposit box, just like you would do a will.
Does you no good.
It does not. We've had one like that, and they had to go to probate. The difference between a will and a transfer on death deed is you do not go through probate with a transfer on death deed. It supersedes a will. So this is the one chance that you have to decide and tell everyone, designate your property to whomever you choose and not have to go through probate. So this protects your property in whatever county in the state of Texas the property is on. Nia, is there something else I'm forgetting?
Real property only. This does not count or include any of the other assets and things like that. So
yeah, don't do that. It's only real property. And we had some people that said, hey, we own 20, 30 properties. if you want to fill out a transfer on death deed from each property, we're good with that. We will notarize it. Remember, this is not income qualifying. So we're here to help anybody, whoever lives in Houston, that wants to get a transfer on death deed notarized for free. Now, you can also get that information and take it to your bank, and they will notarize it, or you can go and hire a notary, which $6 or so to get it notarized. So if you're looking for a transfer on death deed, we'll email it to you. We'll email the information. You can get it notarized yourself.
And the first Thursday of each month, we have our legal advance planning and why you need it, where an attorney from Lone Star Legal Aid will also be talking about all of those documents that make up an estate plan, including a transfer on death deed and completing it, and why do you need it, and the importance of it as an alternative to having a will. But we go over in detail about all of those documents. So if you want to join us for that, it's the first Thursday of each month, which is February 1st, next week on the 1st. Register to come back and get that information as well. So
get your transfer on death deed, get any paperwork that you're interested in filling out yourself. And on the first Tuesday in February, have it ready. So then when we have the presenter tell you step 1, 2, 3, you already have your information in front of you that you can be filling it out, correctly. Now, still remember, everything that we or any of our presenters are talking about is for informational purposes only and not legal advice. I don't care if it's an attorney telling you how to do it, giving you information on how to do it. The only way it's legal advice is if you hire an attorney and you pay them to give you legal advice. Right now, we are giving everything that we're giving you is for informational purposes only. Am I correct, Nia, or is there something I'm forgetting, just in case?
that's absolutely correct. And you will hear us reiterate that quite a few more times, just so people will know and get a good understanding and a grasp that the information that we do present on all of our workshops is for informational purposes only and not legal advice. So with that being said, again, thank y'all very much for coming and joining us this afternoon. Look for my email to come with the follow-up, the link of this information, the attached flyers that we discussed, as well as the schedule for our February workshops that we've got coming up. So you all have a wonderful afternoon. Stay safe, stay dry out there, and enjoy this for as long as we can until this either the cold or the heat comes back. This is kind of a happy medium, but it's wet right now, but it's better than being freezing cold or super, super hot. So one or the other.
I love the heat. I'm from Puerto Rico and I can ride my motorcycle all day long. Right now, it's too cold and it's raining. You have to hear me sing to release my stress instead of riding my motorcycle. And you don't want to do that.
104 humid heat is not comfortable for anybody. I don't care what motorcycle you ride. There's no amount of breeze that's coming through at 104 and sweltering humidity. There's not. Yeah, I'll no. All right. Y'all take care. We will see you all next time. Thank you. And you have a wonderful remainder of your afternoon.
Stay safe, everyone.
All right.